Hi everyone, my name is Heather McCarty and I'm the Director of Learning and Development here with The Mission Continues. And one thing that we've been hearing from a lot of our veterans and volunteers is how challenging time management can be during this time. In times of high stress and uncertainty, it can be a big challenge to determine what gets crossed off your list, in what order, and what things you shouldn't even really be focusing your time on. Now, although during times of stress, this can be even more challenging to determine, the tool that we're going to be looking at today is something that can be used at any time and is used in many different settings and is not unique to us. We're going to look at the importance urgency matrix. It's often called the Eisenhower matrix as well for decision making. And through this time, we're going to look at how you can begin to sort out what needs to happen, how quickly, where you should be spending your time potentially, and where you can let things go. So let's get started with that. So you can see the matrix here on the screen. And on the left-hand side, it shows the continuum of importance going from low importance at the bottom to high importance at the top. And across the bottom, you can see the urgency going from not very urgent on the left to very urgent on the right, which creates these four quadrants. Now, amongst these four quadrants, you can see there are things that fall into the important but not urgent bucket. Those are those things that have meaning but don't have time-bound constraints to them. You also have those things that are both very important and hold weight, but also have a significant time crunch to them. And those are the important and urgent things. And along the bottom, you can see those things that fall into the bucket of not really being of importance or of value to what you have going on, and also not needing to happen in any particular time frame. Those are those things that are both not important and not urgent. And then finally, we have things that have some sort of time crunch to them or feeling like they need to happen quickly, but they aren't necessarily of high importance, meaning they don't have a lot of relevancy to what you might be focusing on at the time. So with this comes the way that we can consider what we do with those things. So those things that are important, have really serious merit to you, but don't necessarily have to be done quickly, those are those things that we can decide to do later. This is the place where you want to think about a plan. When would you tackle this? When would you like to attempt to plan for this to happen? And then you can see in the upper right-hand quadrant that important and urgent. These are those things that we have to focus on, we have to do first. And they go to the top of your to-do list. And then along the bottom, you'll see those things that are not important and not urgent. Those are the things that we can really just eliminate. Take them off our list, take the stress away, take the wonder about how are we going to get that done. Those are the things that really distract us, whether it's from distraction of work that we have to do or just distraction in general. And then finally, the last thing are those things that really have a sense of urgency and have a time constraint to them, but may not be directly tied to the things that you're working on or your particular priorities. And those are the things that we can delegate. Determine other people who could benefit from taking this on or who have the skills, the capacity, the time, and pass it along to them. So this is all well and good. And probably if you're like me, you're thinking, of course, that makes sense completely, until it comes to myself looking at the list that's in front of me. And then I start to wonder which of these are not important and how do I determine if something truly is urgent or not? So let's take a look at that. What you can see here on the right-hand side is my to-do list. So I have a list of things that I've written down that I know are on my mind or that I've decided need to get done. And then on the left-hand side, you can see I have the important urgency matrix. And again, with reminders of how each of those quadrants can be thought about with the do later, do first, eliminate, and delegate. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start thinking about each of these items, ask myself about their importance, but also their urgency to decide where they should fall so that I can determine where I need to spend my time first and maybe where there's some things that can be crossed off altogether that I don't even need to worry about. So the first thing I have on here is I've been thinking about for a while how I would love to have the folders in my email organized. However, The reality is that's not something that really is a priority. That's a nice to have, and maybe at some point I'll do it. So for right now, it's something that I'll eliminate. It's not important, but it also isn't urgent for me. The next thing, I had an event this past weekend with my girls and took a ton of photos. And I've been thinking about how I need to update the photo album on Facebook to show those. While I love to share photos on Facebook, the reality is that this is not something that really is important right now. The people who were closest to me, who I wanted to share those photos with, I've already texted them the photos. And there also is no urgency to this. There's no time constraint on when I need to put those up there, and I can do those at another time. So now I have identified already 2 things from my list that really can be eliminated, that I don't need to think about. The next thing I see on my list is a reminder that there's an ask to proofread and edit a document for another staff member. This is for a piece of work that they are engaging on. And while I am always looking to help out a fellow colleague, the reality right now is I might not need to focus my time there. However, it is something that likely somebody else either really likes to do, has the capacity for, or would be better at it than I am. So that becomes something that I'm going to delegate, because while it's urgent, the staff member has a need to get this done, it's not necessarily high on my priority list or importance, because it's not directly related to what I'm tasked with doing. So it falls into this category of being urgent, but not important. And that means I can determine someone else who could help ensure that that happens. Now, the next thing that I have on here is a check-in call with my family. And it's something that I've been doing pretty regularly during this time when we have been at home and not able to see each other. But it's also something that I do pretty regularly because I don't live near any of my family. So for me, this is something that is very important to me. It's important to ensure that I maintain strong relationships with my family. And it's also important to me that I know how my family's doing, especially during this time. Now, there's no sense of time constraint to this. I don't have any urgency around this. I don't need to do it by a certain time. So this is something that is important, but not urgent. And I can plan to do it. I can decide that that's something that I'll do on Friday afternoon, or that's something that I'll do on Sunday morning. So that goes into this do later category. I look at my list, and the next thing on there is a prescription that needs to be filled for my husband of his daily medication. Now, this is something that is important that I do and make sure gets done today. Not only is it important for his health that he has it, but it's also urgent because there is a time by which he needs to take it. So this is something that I know will have to happen pretty quickly on my list today. I can't push it off. I can't delegate it to somebody else. And that allows me to know that this is not only important and needs my attention, but also needs my attention today. I have another thing on my list that I've been thinking about for a while, which is planning how I'm going to pursue my professional development. As someone who loves learning, this is incredibly important for me, but also just as a professional, I know that continuing to see how I can grow is valuable to me in the short term and long term. There's not a particular window in which I need to do this by. So while I think it's important, I don't have to do it immediately. And what I can do is decide when I'm going to plan out this time. Perhaps I'm going to block some time on Thursday morning to do some research on this. So this goes into that do later category. And the final piece of information that's on my to-do list for right now is that there is an invoice that's due tomorrow to a vendor for some services that we engaged with them. Because of the fact that this has a pretty short timeline and that it's my responsibility to ensure that that invoice is received by that vendor, this also becomes something that's not only important, but urgent. And it means that I'm now clear of a couple things that I need to get done pretty quickly today. So although I shared this particular to-do list that has a variation of those things that are for my professional life and also personal life, you can take the approach to separate those out completely so that you're doing an audit of those things professionally that you have and determining what's important and what's urgent, and then also separately doing that for your personal life. For me, it was easier to try to go through all of this together because, like I said, especially in times of high stress, it can feel pretty overwhelming that there are so many things to do and an uncertainty about where to even start. Thanks for joining in with us today for this quick look at a potential tool that you can use for time management, and we look forward to seeing everybody again soon.